And we're going to Venezuela next. This is an interesting piece. Deep within the rainforests of Venezuela, there is a series of plateaus that sit more than 9,000 feet up above sea level and rise up 1,310 feet from the surrounding terrain like tabletops. And from above, they look like islands in the sky. And these are the Tapwe, a Pamon Indian word for mountain, and the most famous of which is called Mount Roraima, Roraima. And the Tapwe are so unique in their geography that thousands of plant species exist nowhere else on the planet except on these plateaus. Now, in reality, all tabletop mountains, yes, you in South Africa, and the word mesa is linked to the very tall ancient trees that were cut down and then petrified into rock. But perhaps the word Tapwe, Tepui, gives us a clue. It means the house of the gods. Now, the mystical mountains fascinated explorers and writers for centuries, and most notably Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who described an ascent of Mount Roraima in his 1912 novel The Lost World. Now, in Doyle's novel, a group of explorers found that dinosaurs and other extinct creatures were still alive and well on the remote plateaus. And some people today still believe that this is a real possibility. But when you have seen a pterodactyl flying, you know this to be true. And I spoke about this to the gathering last weekend. There are tens of thousands of islands around the world that only clown-based families have visited or mapped. And the public are absolutely oblivious as to what is or goes on there. Now, Japan, believe it or not, is the country with the most islands, a staggering 6,500 alone. And yet, how many of those islands are referenced? Now, once it was impenetrable to all but the Pamon indigenous people, Mount Roraima really was a lost world, and the mountain plateaus were already established when South America was linked with Africa to form the supercontinent Gondwana, which means, according to scientists, which is rubbish, they were first formed perhaps 400 to 250 million years ago, and during this time molten rock forced its way up through the cracks into the sandstone landmass. At the same time, wind and water swept across Gondwana to erode the raised islands into the mountain ranges. No. And they said the region would come to look much like it does now around 20 million years ago. In my opinion, that is scientific bullcrap of wind and erosion. But when the Pamon people describe a god called Makun Ema cut down the tree and caused a cataclysm of floods and fire, turning people and animals into stone, all very petrified forest Arizona, that to me. And because the Tapwe have been isolated for so long atop their high, lonely plateaus, the flora and fauna of the Tapwe provide an organic illustration of the processes of evolution. And it is guessed that at least half of the estimated 10,000 plant species there are unique to Tapwe and surrounding lowlands, and new species were being discovered there as late as 1989. Now, although all of the Tapwe have been climbed, only a few have been extensively explored, and prior to the arrival of Europeans, the natives of Venezuela viewed the Tapwe as having special mythical significance. And according to the Pamon Indians, Mount Roraima is the stump of a mighty tree that once held all the fruits and tuberous vegetables in the world. However, it was felled by one of their ancestors, and the tree crashed to the ground, unleashing a terrible flood. And they believed that if a person ascended to the top of the Tapwe, he or she would not come back alive. Now, climbing the Tapwe is exceedingly difficult, and is made all the more so by the frequent rains that make the rocky footpaths slippery and also muddy. But the first European explorer to write about the Tapwe was Sir Walter Raleigh in 1594. He was not British, he was French, just saying. And he wrote of a crystal mountain covered with diamonds and waterfalls, and said, There falleth over a mighty river, which toucheth no part of the side of the mountain, but falleth to the ground with a terrible noise and clamour, as if 1,000 great bells were knocking against one another. But what it hath I know not. Neither durst he or any of his men ascend to the top of the said mountain, and those people adjoining being his enemies as they were, and the way to it so impassable. Now, what he was describing was what is now called as Angel Falls, which was named after the mid-20th century American Jimmy Angel, who was the first person to fly over the area. And it's also said to be the world's tallest waterfall. Now, the Angel Falls were recently featured in Disney's Up, where the falls are referred to as Paradise Falls. But today's travellers may not stumble upon dinosaurs or other prehistoric creatures. They will be able to see black frogs and tarantulas that exist nowhere else on the planet, or perhaps not. And it's believed there are many other species unique to Roraima that are yet to be discovered. As for the term Gondwana, which is said to be the continental shelf split from Americas and Africa, it is actually the name of a region in north-central India. From the Sanskrit Gondwana, from Vana forest to Gonda, which is the Sanskrit name of the Dravidian people, said to mean literally fleshy navel or belly button. The Pamon Indians were the Kalima. Maya or Mayan is a word which is very familiar to the Western world, but very few know what it actually means. And it is a word which was used by the rishis, sages of ancient India, to describe the nature of this universe of changing forms. Now, the rishis have always been telling us that matter is not real or as solid as we think. And they say it's only an illusion projected by our senses, and they called it Maya, or the magical creative power of Brahman. But it's interesting that the tribes in America used the Indian name. Like the previous story, they were the Kalimar peoples, hence the sacrifices of their own people and also others.